There you are. Esteban, welcome to the show, man. How you doing this morning?
Hi, Jamal, and hello to everyone who's joining us. I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Excellent. Now, just for the audience, Esteban Carrillo, he's a Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist and current editor for The Cradle. He was previously with Tele Sur English. Man, thank you for joining me. Where are you located, by the way, right now?
Right now, I'm actually not in Beirut. I am in Toronto.
Okay,
I've
good.
come
You're
here with my
safe.
wife. So for the time being, we're here, which is I'm grateful, honestly, because of the situation we're about to discuss in Lebanon that has really truly escalated over the past several weeks.
Man, I am just glad that you were safe.
Thank you. Thank
And
you, Jamal.
there was Laith Maruth was here also, and
Mm.
he is in Beirut.
No.
And he would say there are drones above my head. There's stuff flying over. They're
Yeah,
buzzing
that's what I
buildings.
hear from my coworkers that the droning, right? The drone
Yeah,
from the drones, it's nonstop. It's nonstop over several, not just over Beirut, right? At this point, it's the entirety of Lebanon that is being targeted. It's no longer just Shiite villages or towns. It's the Sunni towns. It's the Christian towns. It's everywhere that Israel wants to hit. They can hit. They're destroying the Bekaa Valley. One of the most ancient sites in human history. The,
yeah.
the the Temple of Jupiter that exists there. The south is essentially destroyed. The city of Tyre, another UNESCO World Heritage Site, is being destroyed. Nabatea in the north as well. The massacres. They've been hitting nonstop. They've been hitting nonstop, and it's a marked escalation since the U.S. election. This is a response to Trump getting elected, and this is a new Israeli war cabinet as well, a new Israeli government, essentially, that Netanyahu, after he fires his
Israel
former
Katz,
defense
right?
minister, and Israel
Yeah,
Katz,
because
who
they
was
got rid
serving
of
as,
Gallant. They fired Gallant, and I remember
yes,
Gallant eventually left, but they brought on Israel Katz.
yes.
Is there any difference though between these two? I mean, both are Zionists. Is there any difference in the level of zealotry between Katz and Gallant?
I think that's the right word that you use there. The zealotry, the ultra religiousness, right? In their belief of what the state of Israel is and what it needs to accomplish. There is a slight difference, I would say, in that Yoav Gallant, he was two things. He was a pawn from the
Mhm.
Pentagon of the U.S. The Ministry of Defense. This is why Netanyahu had been trying to get rid of him for so long.
Yeah.
And the other thing, he's a military man. He's a career general that butted heads with the prime minister many times because of what he saw as an aimlessness to the war in Gaza and to the war in Lebanon as well, right? Like no achievable goals, no end game, no day after plan, just war for the sake of war, just killing for the sake of killing. Again, Gallant, the man who said at the beginning of this genocide, we are fighting human animals and we must act accordingly. So,
Yeah.
not exactly a moderate figure, but when compared to the more zealot elements of the Israeli government, he was, I guess, in a way, at the very least, this is yesterday, I believe, by Beirut airport.
Yeah.
And
There's a
so
plane
Netanyahu gets
that
rid
was
of him,
literally
right?
on the runway as that
Yeah,
happened.
exactly. Meters from the runway. Like
Yeah.
at this point, we are, possibly days, if not hours, away from them just directly striking the airport. And we know at this point that Israel can do as they please, because all the Western media, all the Western governments are gonna play. What's the word? They're gonna be there to interfere, right? They're gonna play interference. They're gonna claim that this was all Hezbollah warehouses. At this point, what Israel is bombing, in particular in Beirut, but also across Lebanon, really, they're bombing the buildings where the displaced are taking shelter. We're talking about over 1.2 million people displaced. So Israel is just targeting them at this point, trying to ignite internal strife, right? And since Gallant gets fired, since Trump wins the presidency, names an ultra Zionist cabinet. Like he speaks for officials. This is no longer make America great again. This is make Israel great again. This
Yes.
is Israel first officials one after the other. And we know that there's not going to be a de-escalation. We know there's not going to be a ceasefire, just like Gaza, right? In Gaza, the talk of ceasefire of the two-state solution at this point, it's becoming a bit insulting. Let's be honest,
Yeah.
to the lives of those who remain, and obviously to the lives that have been lost. In Lebanon is the same approach, just mass destruction. Over the past couple of days, the new U.S. ambassador to Lebanon, Lisa Johnson, delivered a new, ceasefire proposal to to officials, and they are describing it as blackmail. They're describing it as blackmail. They are describing this proposal as being
what it is, right?
exactly
I mean,
as being either you sign or we escalate.
It's like we're trying to bomb Beirut into the Stone Age, and if you don't sign this surrender deal, we're going to keep doing it. It's just that.
It is. There's no other way to describe it. You're right.
So there was a meeting recently. I believe it took place in Saudi Arabia, and it was an Arab Muslim meeting with all of the groups coming together. And Bashar al-Assad, this is fascinating on a few points. For one, Syria is brought back into the fold. Saudi Arabia and Iran have been working together. I mean, even to the point of military drills. So again, this is a new world that Donald Trump is somewhat coming into. This notion of the Abraham Accords, where he's going to get these countries to attack Iran, I can't see these countries being on board for that, especially with the association of BRICS in regards to Saudi Arabia and Iran. But Bashar al-Assad at that meeting effectively said, we have the power or the material means to change the context of this on the ground. I'm paraphrasing. And we just need the will to do it. Effectively saying this should stop, and we need to use a military force in order to make the stop. Now, I mean, there seems to be no energy or propensity for that at all. Is there a level of blood that the Arab community would accept that would compel them to respond to this level of atrocity? Or is it just for the next year, we're seeing Israel kill as many people as it wants?
It's an interesting question because there's always a difference between the Arab people, right? The population of the Arab nations and their leaders. Right. There's a complete disconnect there. And, when we talk about a dictatorship or a monarchy or whatever, you look no further than the Gulf, look no further than Jordan, look no further than Egypt, right? These are the Arab allies that when the people protest against the genocide in Gaza, they get repressed. They get, the police are sent to disperse. If they gather outside the Israeli embassy, they get beaten up. So I think that's this is like on the micro level, right? This is the street level, and that reflects itself on the macro, right? When you have these summits in which Saudi Arabia keeps talking about the two-state solution with the 1967 borders, and like this is the only way we're going to normalize. And like of course, you have someone like Syria that has been, the target of a U.S.-Israeli war for the past 11, 12 years at this point. Destroyed their territory, broken into pieces, controlled by different powers. And this is going to be the country, this is going to be the leadership that in the end is going to speak the truth, the reality, right? Like we need to do something on the ground because here with, signing papers and giving declarations, it's all nice, it's all good, I guess, for your own, internal peace. But other than that, it doesn't change, it doesn't reflect anything because at this point, the only groups that are actually standing up and putting themselves on the line to stop this genocide are what they're called the resistance axis, right? They are Hezbollah, they are Hamas, they are the other Palestinian factions, and Ansar Allah that this week launched a direct attack against the USS Lincoln in the Red Sea. Exactly, they launched a very imagine that, right? Like I saw this report from Axios yesterday, like some top level general, I guess like the Pentagon's, the person who's in charge of the purchases, right? Describing the Yemeni arsenal as something that he has never seen before, something that has him shocked. He said, he used these words, right? I am shocked at what Yemen is capable of doing. I have never seen anything like this, right? You're talking about a top level general saying these things. And, kind of Yemen has been the equation that neither the US nor Israel has been able to solve. And now with Trump coming in, I'm sure the solution is going to be, the hammer, as it often is.
And I know, but Saudi Arabia has been doing that for like 6 years. And
Saudi Arabia is desperate for this war to end, because they entered Yemen. Remember, when the Yemen war was announced, it was announced from the Rose Garden in Washington, D.C. by the Saudi ambassador. And they said, we're going to be in and out in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we're going to get rid of these rebels. It's been, what is this now, like 8-9 years at this
You
point?
know what's funny about that? The New York Times ran that story, and the New York Times pointed out that Obama wanted to get the JCPOA passed, and he was getting a huge amount of pushback from Saudi Arabia on it, because at the time, Saudi Arabia and Iran were at each other's throats.
Yes.
And so Obama basically greenlit Saudi Arabia attacking Yemen for Saudi Arabia not pitching a bitch about signing the JCPOA. And they told him, as you said, he was like, it'll be a few days. It'll be quick. And Obama, in the article, knew that this was a lie and this was not going to be quick, but he had no idea how bloody it was going to ultimately end up being. That stuff is fascinating to me. It's like the idea that Obama is given permission to bomb another country is astonishing. Like, when you think about it, you are allowing one country that is supposed to be sovereign to bomb another country that is supposed to be sovereign with your permission to do so.
Exactly.
That's astonishing.
Exactly. You know, and Saudi Arabia kind of, you know, after everything we've talked about in Gaza had already happened in Yemen, right? I mean, in a further period of time, in a larger period of time, and actually, like to a less intensity. Let's be honest here, because what's happening in Gaza is indescribable. So Yemen, you know, was already suffering from sanctions, right? A complete blockade, naval, air, sea, naval, air, and land blockade. The constant bombing, the internal, you know, like Yemen is also divided. Yemen is also controlled by like different factions like Syria. And after all of these, you know, famine, the spread of cholera, you know, like a really a difficult crisis that Yemen went through. And now they're on the other side launching attacks against the U.S. Navy in the Red Sea, in making, you know, like 3-4 star generals go like, what the hell? What is this? I have never seen anything like this in my life. How are we going to solve it? You know, I forget who it was, but some other U.S. official earlier this year, he said that the solution in Yemen is not going to come at the end of a gun. At the end of, you know, it's gonna come. It needs to come diplomatically, and that's the truth about the entire region. That's the truth about Gaza. That's the truth about the West Bank. That's the truth about, you know, the Iraqi factions as well. Iraq is also heating up significantly because the Iraqi resistance factions are very steadfast in their attacks. They've been attacking Israel on a daily basis. The other day, they announced 5 attacks in one day. Right?
Do you think so? Iran is saying, well, I guess there are 2 questions. One, I want to play this for you. So, you know, the Biden administration pulled this political ploy where they said something to the effect, oh, God, there are 3 questions. So they pull this political ploy. They effectively say, well, we're going to give you 30 days. Now, it just so happened, coincidentally, of course, that there were 30 days to the election also. And they said, well, you better allow 300 trucks in or else we're going to be angry, and we may cut your funding. So they didn't do it, obviously, right? Nobody believed that they were going to do it. So this is Patel being questioned by reporters.
I know.
And they are getting in his ass on this issue because it's like, dude, you're the one that brought up 300 trucks. We didn't say that. You brought that up.
Yeah, exactly.
And he is trying to he's trying to explain how extermination and mass expulsion is not what's happening in Israel. He's trying to explain that, despite the fact that that's exactly what's taking place. This is Patel.
Take appropriate action.
Come on, Patel, talk.
Daphne, go ahead.
Thank you. Human Rights Watch said today that Israeli authorities have caused forced displacement of Palestinians in Gaza to an extent that constitutes war crimes and crimes against humanity. Have you seen anything that would make you agree with that assessment?
We have not. Certainly, forced displacement is something that continues to be inconsistent with the principles that Secretary Blinken laid out in Tokyo. And again, I will let our partners in the IDF speak to the specific military tactics and operations, but it is wholly consistent and acceptable to ask civilians to evacuate a certain area while they are conducting certain military operations, and then for them to be able to go home. We have not seen.
I hate these people. Like, they're such liars and covering for a genocide. Like, him, Matt Miller, these people are sociopaths.
You're
And
very
here's-
generous calling them people, Jamal, because this is beyond.
Well, and here's the truth of the matter, right? Like he's like, well, they're just asking them to leave during the military exercises. That's the only reason they're asking them to leave. He knows damn well that that's not true. Palestinians would not be allowed to return to their homes in northern Gaza, says the IDF. Meaning, this article came out before. Meaning, he knows everything that this article says. He knows, he's fully aware what Israel is doing, and that they have already said, we are not allowing people to go back to the north. That is going to be our space. That's enough. That is new territory to which we're stealing. Same thing in Lebanon, southern Lebanon. Their objective, we're going to steal southern Lebanon.
Yes.
And we want the Lebanese government to give it over to us. Hell, we want the Lebanese army to even fight Hezbollah if we can get it to do that. And he knows that. And he's like, well, that is inconsistent with what we would wish and what, Blinken has laid out. So no, we don't see that. They will they'll go back to their homes after 70 years?
Exactly. No. This thing with these U.S. officials, and it kind of reminds me of Stockholm syndrome at this point, right? Like, and that is not to make them the victims, because they are not victims of anything. They are perpetrators. They are collaborators.
It makes me think of Nazi propaganda, to be honest.
Exactly. Yeah.
If we're being bluntly honest, like this is Goebbels would be perfectly okay with this. He would be like,
this is exactly right out of the playbook, the same playbook, right? The manufacturing consent, the dismissal, misinformation. And this thing about the Atrox, right? Like, just to go back to your original point about what they were demanding, right? They issued this letter, Blinken and Austin. Mm-hmm. That is just essentially, this letter is like to save their assets, right? It's just so that, like, down the line, when they are brought for trial for their complicity in this genocide, they can point, right, and be like, hey, by the way, we did send this letter and we did say this. But it's completely toothless. It's completely harmless. It's, the date comes and then the U.S. government says, no, actually, they have improved. They did. Right. They did improve. And then you have the UN and 8 different international organizations saying the 8 deliveries in Gaza are actually worse than before the letter was issued. They have gone down. They talk about, I think it was 358 trucks per day that they wanted Israel to allow, right? You're talking, that is, I'm going to do some quick math for you, because the numbers are really where the truth lies here.
They were doing 30. And what the people say, he was like, they barely have 30. And the guy, and Patel, same guy, he was like, well, I'm not going to get into numbers.
Exactly. The numbers that you gave. We're not going to get into the numbers that you gave. Because, like, Israel and the U.S., the two of them, when they give these announcements about the aid to Gaza, they talk about millions of tons of aid, right? Like, we've allowed 40 million or 60 million or whatever many million of tons of aid, and it sounds like a lot, right? Like, of course, it's a lot. But then, like, you actually break down the numbers, and it's, when they say, for example, we have allowed 40 million pounds of aid, that would be
many people?
No, like, that's divided by, the amount that the trucks can carry. That's about 1,300 trucks, because the trucks can carry about 30,000 pounds.
I see.
In average. So you're talking about 1,333 trucks when you're talking about 40 million pounds of aid. That's enough to feed the population of Gaza for 2 days. For 2 days.
Wow.
So when they talk about, we delivered these many million whatever, they're talking about just days, because that's the figure they don't give you. Because before 7 October of 2023, the UN had already determined, the World Food Program had already determined that Gaza, under the blockade that it lived in, needed 500 trucks of aid per day. Per day, 500 trucks to sustain the population. This is before the war. Right. So when the U.S. comes in and says, oh, we need you to deliver at least 350 trucks of aid per day, they're talking about a 150 truck deficit already since before October 7th. It's not enough. It's never going to be enough. It needs to be just a complete flow of aid.
This is the thing, right? When Democrats would say, yeah, but Trump is going to be worse. And I remember, I keep looking at it saying, how? How could he be worse in this situation? Like, Joe Biden has given him any and everything that he wanted, meaning Netanyahu. He's literally given him a blank check. And even if Netanyahu would have said, we're annexing the West Bank, I don't believe for one moment that Joe Biden would have said anything about it at all. And so it's like, for And then they're like, Donald Trump is going to remove the restraints that Joe Biden put on the weapons. What restraints? What restraints? Like, Joe Biden is as far right on this issue than you could be. And maybe if there's a little bit of daylight left that Trump may get, it's negligible. It really is.
It is.
I mean, maybe you don't get the grumbling behind the scenes that you get with Joe Biden, but all things being equal, people like Blinken, people like Amos Hochstein, people like Matt Miller, people like Patel, all of these people are sociopaths. And they are backing, covering a genocide in real terms and lying about it all the way through. The idea, Patel knows they're being starved. He knows, John Kirby knows those people are being starved. And yet, he would come out and make a statement like that. Well, starvation is inconsistent with our policies in Israel, and that is not what Blinken has said. It's just outrageous.
It's beyond, like the difference between Biden and Trump in the genocide. I mean, internally, that's for the U.S. population to decide. But in terms of foreign policy and in terms of support for Israel, you're just talking about, the form, the superficial, right. Like the way that they express themselves and what they say, right? You're going to have a Trump White House that is going to be very straightforward, right? At the very least, you're not going to get the bullshit. You're not going to get the Patel being like, well, we are very concerned or whatever. They're going to be like, because these are human animals.
Yeah,
we're going to kill the terrorists. And Israel has the right.
Like, that's what we're here for. We're going to kill the terrorists. That's what we're here
for.
Exactly.
They're just going to be more straightforward. That's it. That's the difference. Because what restraints? You're completely right there, Jamal. What restraints have there been?
Yeah.
In August, I think they were talking already about a 50,000 pound shipments of bombs that had reached Israel. The figures are just staggering. The jet fuel, the parts. Israel is flying F-35s to bomb Gaza and Lebanon, not because they need the technology of an F-35. It's because they want to have all of their planes active at, constantly running just so that they can keep up the pace of the bombing. And to keep up the pace of the bombing, they need to keep up the deliveries of jet fuel. They need to keep up the deliveries of the repairs, right? Because you're talking about very advanced planes. So the parts are not just coming from the US, they're coming from Japan. They're coming from Germany. They're coming from, bases. They're coming from all over the world. They just, all come to Israel. And so this goes so far beyond, Blinken and Miller and Patel and whoever else. Yeah. This goes into, the Western governments. This goes into NATO. This goes into the G7. This goes into their allies. This goes into the Arab nations, right? Like a few weeks ago, you had Egypt. Egypt allowed the docking of a ship that was carrying explosives for Israel. After it was turned away by several European nations, Egypt opens the port of Alexandria. Egypt allows an Israeli warship to cross the Suez Canal flying the Israeli flag.
That's a really good point. Explain that to us. So is it just Israel gets money from the U.S., and so it's subservient? Is there some other political motive in mind for Israel? I mean, for Egypt to be that obsequious to this kind of power structure? It just seems like it's outlandish. I can't even believe that the Egyptian public will be okay with this.
No, of course they're not, and but I don't know at this point, honestly, because it's been so long, right? Like it's been happening so constantly. As far as, a nation like Egypt or Jordan or the Saudis, etc., there was this report recently that apparently in the days after October 7th, when Blinken, his first of, 11, 12 failed trips to the region, right. He met with like all of the leaders, and all of them said, we want Israel to defeat Hamas. We want Israel to defeat and get rid of Hamas. Why? Because they have already hitched their boat, right, or their horse to the U.S., to Israel, to normalization. Egypt has normalized relationships since the 1990s, if I'm not mistaken. Jordan, the first Arab country to normalize ties. You have, like the others that have also signed the normalization agreements. They don't want to go back. They don't want that. They prefer the help of the United States. Why? Right. Because they are threatened by Iran, in particular the Gulf countries, right? They are threatened by Iran. They could sign and they could make friends, but they are always going to be threatened by Iran because there's always going to exist that, Iran is a Shiite majority nation. Well,
I know, but it seems like that this is bringing together Shia and Sunni. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, I know that there's a conflict there, right? But it seems like the BRICS, in the way that structure, okay, I'm saying this poorly. Look, it looks like the global majority, the BRICS countries specifically, have decided strategically that peace is a weapon, and that the US uses chaos around the globe in order to destabilize various governments, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's Ukraine, whether it was Hong Kong when it was trying to go after China. It's a way that it goes after and undercuts countries. The MEK in Iran, they would love to try to get their hands on them or try to get them to be more of a political force. China and Russia seems to have come on this thing of, okay, so we want to bring these countries together. So Saudi Arabia and Iran, you guys are going to be together, especially if both of us are going to be in BRICS. China and India, we're going to get rid of the hostilities between us, especially if both of us are going to be in BRICS. And even going with this notion of we're sovereign countries, we're not going to invade one another, we're not going to sanction one another, meaning they seem to have taken a different tact in regards to the way they're trying to organize the world. Iran and Saudi Arabia just so happen to be under that umbrella. And again, they're having military exercises at this point. So it seems that Israel has somehow alienated even that group between themselves. I guess my thought is, it doesn't seem like Iran and Saudi Arabia is that much of an issue currently in the context of what is happening in Israel. And Donald Trump, who the first time around was able to work with Saudi Arabia very closely and was against Iran fully, well, the world is different. And correct me if I'm wrong on this. Saudi Arabia, Iran, the Muslim countries at this point seem to be far more organized than they were when Trump was in office that time around when he was trying to pass the Abraham Accords. All of them are angry at Israel right now. I know Jordan is obsequious, fair enough. And as you pointed out, Egypt has allowed that ship to go through. But it seems like they're far more united in the things that they're saying. I mean, is the things that they're saying purely for public consumption, or is there a reality behind it?
I think there's you're talking about politicians at the end of the day, right?
Yeah,
you're not talking about like revolutionary leaders or something or other, right? Like these are people who are good. They speak for the cameras. So I would always take what they say with a grain of salt.
Right, yeah.
But the thing with BRICS, the thing with the Saudi-Iran rapprochement, which was brokered by China, right? Remember?
Yep, it was.
I feel like particularly in the case of Saudi Arabia, they kind of, and the UAE as well, they kind of want to keep their eggs in different baskets, right? They don't want to have to just compete. Saudi Arabia hasn't officially joined the BRICS. They haven't. It's been like a year.
That's true. That is true.
So
that is true.
Then you had and just to speak for the BRICS, I'm going a bit far at this point, but just to give you an idea. Look at what happened last month in the summit when Brazil, out of nowhere, just says no to Venezuela, right? Venezuela is about to join the BRICS. And Brazil, the foreign minister of Brazil comes in with a last-minute message and says, no to Venezuela, we veto, for absolutely no reason, right? No. But then you look deeper, and you have to realize that we can talk about multipolarity and, post-hegemon world as much as we want. But there's always going to be pushback. They're always going to fight back. And, right now in the BRICS, for example, you have Saudi Arabia, one foot in, one foot out. You have, you have U.S. allies. You still have U.S. allies. Like these people aren't, you're not talking about countries that are, have broken with the West, right? You're not talking about North Korea and Nicaragua.
They want to keep a hand in both worlds. They don't want to start some kind of economic war where they're like, I'm siding with this group over the other. They want to be able to do both. And I think
that there is one thing in particular about the Muslim nations in West Asia in particular, and is that I don't think any of them want the war to actually, like this to become a full-blown, right. Iran, Israel, U.S. war that engulfs everyone. They don't want that. War is profitable for a small group of people.
Right.
It's not profitable for everyone.
Well, yeah, I don't think they want war. And I guess that's kind of my point. The thing that they seem to agree on is we, A, are pissed off at Israel. B, don't want this to expand into a regional conflict. Do you think Iran is going to go through with True Promise 3? I mean, because they're threatening it big time. And Morandi has been all over basically saying, we're going to hit him, it's going to hurt. I get the sense that Russia is counseling calm on some level, especially considering they are interested in doing BRICS. They're interested in this kind of economic thing and getting this money thing off the ground. So maybe they're not necessarily all that involved or want it, but it seems like Iran is very adamant that they're going to strike. Now, I am terrified of what this looks like, because the reality of it is, Russia seems to be coming up with a security arrangement and agreement with Iran. So there's that. Let's put a pin in that. Trump is coming in and has a hard-on to go after Iran right off the bat. So there's that. And the lunatics that he's put into the administration are effectively hawks, full on. If there's a situation where there's a war, I fully believe that Trump would probably join in on that war.
Oh, 100%.
And considering that they may have a security agreement with Russia at that point, we're talking about nuclear nations, once again, with their proxies going at one another. Like, this is like terrifying. This can go extraordinarily bad. The one bright spot is Elon Musk apparently met behind the scenes with a Iranian foreign minister.
UN ambassador, to Iran.
Yeah, do you give any credence to that? I mean, the people said that the meeting went well and saying they were trying to de-escalate. I don't know what that de-escalation would look like. I don't know if Donald Trump is trying to come up with his own version of the JCPOA.
My God. Yeah, I don't know.
I know, right? I mean,
Elon
look, Trump wants deals. And if he can get a deal, he'll run with it. That's the catch with him. That's not true with Democrats. So I don't know. Give me a take on that, though. Do you think there's any... What do you think is going on with that? And I know you don't have a crystal ball. I'm just...
No, but you know, like you just need to look at the facts, right? Like Trump has stacked his cabinet with Iran hawks, you know, from top to bottom. From like all of these people would love nothing more than to spark a war with Iran. So I think, you know, there's a bit of a spoiler already there. Trump was the one who pulled out of the JCPOA, of the Iran nuclear deal. Trump is the one that ordered the killing of Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad, the IRGC commander. Trump is the one, you know, like Trump has not been friendly to Iran in his first administration, so there's no reason to think he's going to be friendly now. Especially, remember that they were blaming Iran for the assassination attempts, right? Like the Democrats were saying, the Democratic government, right, was saying
it's trying to kill Trump.
Iran is trying to kill Trump.
The Justice Department put out indictments for people trying to murder Trump.
Which is like, you know, like, why would Iran do that? Like, like Iran has been, as you're saying, you know, like they're threatening the True Promise 3.
Yeah,
Iran has been so careful in the way that it actually enters this conflict in their attacks against Israel, in their attacks against U.S. bases, right? You know, again, when they kill Soleimani, when the Trump orders the assassination of Soleimani, Iran retaliates. They hit a base in Syria very heavily, or it was maybe a base in Iraq, but they give them a heads up, right? They give them a heads up. Same happened with the first True Promise, and maybe to some extent the second one as well. So Iran has been very careful. So why the hell would they all of a sudden, during the U.S. election, be like, "Oh, we're gonna kill Donald Trump"?
Oh, it's weird. That stuff is intel.
Like, it's so
honestly, that's like the CIA screwing around.
But you know, it's like this is what's out there. This is like what the media is talking about. This is how it's being portrayed. And so you have the cabinet, right, full of Iran hawks. You have these reports. There was a report this week that the Trump officials are already talking about instigating regime change in Iran. What does that mean? Probably what you were saying, no, the MEK or the Kurdish separatists, or just, you know, civil war, as they often do. And in Iran, what you need to understand as far as what's coming is that there's essentially two leaderships, right? You have the president, who is in charge of essentially all the political topics, economic as well. And you have the supreme leader. You have, you know, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who is in charge of the military. Right. He is the one who decides. He's the one who calls the shots in these terms. And, you know, yesterday, the president, Pezeshkian, he was talking to the head of the UN nuclear agency, right? And he's talking about that Iran is, you know, willing, has a willingness to resolve any issues, any concerns, you know, like essentially Iran saying, like, we don't have nuclear weapons, you know, come and look, we don't have them. Right. So stop with that shit. The other guy, Khamenei, I'm sorry, not Khamenei, I'm sorry, the head of the IRGC, General Salami, on the same day he gives a speech, and it's it's fiery. It's
Oh, I
fiery
saw that
against
speech.
Israel.
Yeah.
It's against, like he says, like we are gonna end the Zionist state, and we, don't care if the U.S. comes in. They have nothing on us. It's just, like one statement after the other. So you can you already see like kind of like the difference in which inside Iran, in which there is a calculus. The Iranians have, if anything else, the Iranians have proven to be very, very cold in their calculations and in their strategy, right? And we have seen it since October 7th. They are being, that's, to the point that they are called slow or uninvolved, or like, where is Iran? Why has, I mean, I'm not here to excuse anyone. The Israelis have their strategy, which can only be described as a mad dog strategy. The Iranians have their own strategy, like the Yemenis and the Lebanese, and et cetera, et cetera. They each have their own strategy. And so we will have to see, because I do think there's going to be a retaliation, right? A retaliation from Iran. There has to be.
Well, they keep saying it. They keep boosting it.
And I think just to finish my thought is that the calculations right now have a lot to do with the incoming U.S. government, because the calculations before True Promise 2, they were in relation to giving time for a ceasefire in Gaza, and that failed. So now I think that has switched, and now you have Tehran kind of being like, maybe we are willing to not hit them as hard as we can, but what do we get in return?
I see. Interesting. So I want to move on to another one, right? So this came out, I think this was yesterday. Now, it was reported like a year ago that Egypt had given Israel forewarning that Hamas was planning Aqsa flood. And Netanyahu, apparently for the last, year, has been putting out misinformation, basically creating fake documents in order to go after intelligence officials, trying to blame them and keep the blame off of himself. So this document comes out. IDF investigation. Hours before the surprise attack, the Prime Minister's office was updated with extensive intelligence information. The evidence of the investigation contradicts the version of Netanyahu's people, according to which the Bureau was not updated on signs from the Strip. Colonel S., the intelligence officer at the Bureau, received news about 2 o'clock, I guess it's 2 a.m., including alarming indications. This is the same officer about whom there was concern that senior officials were in possession of the documentation embarrassing the Prime Minister's office. It says the Prime Minister does not deny, or his office did not deny, but claim and emphasize that the Prime Minister himself received the report only at 6:29. I guess this is a translation from an Israeli document.
Yes,
but I guess they're pointing out they knew about it. Netanyahu lied about it, and then created fake documents in order to castigate the intelligence officials in Israel in order to keep blame away from himself on this issue. What do we know about this, by the way? Because again, this is the second time that it's come out that they knew about it, but this is the first report saying, no, they knew hours before the attack took place.
From what has actually come out about this investigation, because this is a criminal investigation into the office of Benjamin Netanyahu that is in particularly looking at tampering, at the tampering of the minutes of those phone calls. The phone calls we're talking about that Netanyahu got in the morning, that his chief of staff tried to blackmail an army officer to manipulate, to tamper with the times of those phone calls, right? The reason why is still unclear, right? As you're saying, there's some that say, that it has to do with with this idea that they had actual advance warning and they tried to pin the blame somewhere else. Others have actually are talking more about the International Criminal Court, the arrest warrants, that this is an attempt to manipulate the official information to kind of help in the defense. The eventual defense of Benjamin Netanyahu.
But come on, Israel doesn't care about the ICC, not in real terms. I mean, can you really foresee a situation?
I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu is not going to be prime minister forever. You always need to keep that, right?
But I don't think he's going to go to any of those countries that would even dare arrest him. Though I could be wrong.
Yeah, They don't
I
care.
would love if they
Obvious.
did.
It's apparent, like the US doesn't care. They don't care. Like the
US doesn't
United
care
States
one
has a
iota.
law that allows them to invade The Hague, that allows
Yeah.
them to send troops into the Netherlands. They have a
George
law.
Bush.
If a
That's
US
right.
soldier or an ally is prosecuted or even
By the way,
questioned.
that would include Israel, by the way.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I guess that tells you the whole story right there. But that doesn't mean, because there's one thing, in all of these, I'm going to call them conspiracy theories because they haven't been proven, that that Israel actually knew beforehand of Al-Aqsa flood and they just let it happen.
Right.
There's one problem with that idea, and is that if they had known, I think the response that they gave to they would have had more control of the narrative, is what I'm trying to get at. They would have shown more control of the narrative, because if there's one thing that Israel and the Zionist lobby has been very good at, is controlling the narrative, is controlling the media.
Just to be clear, though, just to be clear, I don't believe that they knew in advance. Or no, that's not true. I think it was kind of like 9/11. Like, it's like, okay, information is up. Because even like when we've had John on, and he talks about like the way intelligence comes in, and you get these like pieces of information. And it's kind of like in hindsight where you could put the story together and say, oh, see, the information was there. It was right here. But really, when it's happening in real terms, it's not really that clear-cut, straightforward data that can allow you to make a decision. I strongly suspect that they probably did get some kind of heads up about it, but they thought, these animals can't put together an attack like this. These animals have never hit us like this, so we're not concerned about these animals hitting us. I bet it was that. It was.
I think so too. I think it was complete hubris. I think because there's two things that were happening there at that point. With the Israeli occupation. One of them was they had become almost entirely focused on the West Bank.
Right.
Like the West Bank was the thing that they were, like 100% looking at, and by extension of that, they had kind of discounted Hamas entirely. And you can see this in the reports, like Hamas, they saw it as weak, and they saw it as you were saying, these human animals cannot do anything against us. And on top of that, this is always worth mentioning, because, the Palestinian people, just like the Lebanese or just like anywhere else, they're not a monolith, right? They're not like all of them in line. They were protesting against Hamas in the months before October 7th. They were unhappy with the rule of Hamas. Obviously, a rule that cannot, just like any country under sanctions, you cannot just like talk about the government without talking about the sanctions. You cannot talk about Hamas rule without talking about the 20-year blockade that the Gaza Strip had been under. But still, discontent on the streets. And this is, kind of like what was happening beforehand, before October the 7th, where, Hamas just kind of kicks the table over and everything changes, not just in occupied Palestine, but across the entire region and even the world. They changed the world that day. Yeah. So I think there was a lot of hubris. I think there was a lot of disinterest as well. And if there was, an actual, like, we know what's going to happen and we're just not going to do anything, it had more to do with what's happening now. It was like they saw it, if this happened, then it was seen in Tel Aviv as an opportunity to finally flatten Gaza, to finally take control of Gaza, and to, as Jared Kushner said, this is very valuable beachfront property.
Yeah, they get their greater Israel is what they want. I mean, look, for whatever amount of Netanyahu's behavior has to do with this idea of staying out of jail, I think a large part of it too is this idea of his own historical recollection, like him thinking of himself in historical terms. Like, I'm the man that gets us greater Israel. I'm the man that expands the borders of Israel. I think he's thinking of himself in these terms. These grandiose terms. I mean, from my point of view, though, he has put Israel in an existential situation. Like, they are not safer than they were on October 6th.
Not at all.
And, they're still fighting Hamas. They're stuck, bogged down in Lebanon. They can murder as many Lebanese women and children as they want. At the end of the day, that is not the way to win a war. Not really. I mean, the U.S. killed all of those people in Vietnam. We still lost the war. And so it's like according to his war aims, we want to be able to move settlers back to the north. We want to be able to have this kind of open air ghetto without being able to be attacked. This was their war aims, and to create some level of deterrence to Iran. Okay, well, for one, you didn't create deterrence to Iran. They're about to hit you. And at this point, it's very clear that your air defense can't stop them. B, you're still fighting Hezbollah, and they're still firing missiles into the north. Those people cannot go back to the north at this point.
There's more displacement, yeah.
Right, there's more displacement. The soldiers are getting killed. I mean, this was something that Galan admitted to, basically saying we've had losses on the battlefield and we need to effectively raise more troops. And the other part that a lot of people don't really even talk about, the economy of Israel. Like, how can an economy function under these terms? You have all of these Palestinians who were basically doing the labor. Okay, well, that's off the table. You got like 1 million people to leave. Okay, they may not ever come back. Like, your economy has hit the skids on top of everything else. And I guess my question would be, how long can they maintain this? And is it just, well, as long as the U.S. keeps giving them money, they can just keep going on in perpetuity? Is that where we are? And this could be the last question. We fit to the clock.
I think, I think so. I think actually, like a friend of mine told me something that is kind of like gets to the heart of this issue the other day. And he just said, like, do you think the Zionist lobby is ever going to run out of money?
Oh,
They're not. They're not going to run out of money. And look at, like the United States is just like giving them blank checks, like so much money. What is it at this point? It's like around 50 billion since 7 October that has been given to Israel on top of the billions that they get every single year already, right? It's like $3.8 billion that they get every year. So yes, the Israeli economy is being hammered. The north is under a lot of pressure. The city of Haifa is essentially being deserted as we speak. The attacks from Hezbollah are reaching Tel Aviv. They are reaching beyond Tel Aviv. The soldiers, the losses, the attempts at drafting the ultra-Orthodox, which keep failing. They sent new recruitment orders today. Be sure this is not going to go anywhere. The contraction, today I saw that for 2024, the Israeli economy is going to have a growth of 0%. Next year, I think they're expected to have a growth of like 0.3%. But at the end of the day, Israel can get hammered by Iran, by Lebanon, by Yemen. But the day after this war ends, it's going to be Lebanon and Iran and Yemen and Gaza and the West Bank that are going to be in rubble for who knows how long. But Israel is going to get all of the money in the world to rebuild. They're going to get, you're going to have the IMF, the World Bank, everyone come in, like with just bundles of money for the poor Israelis who have been, suffering at the hands of the human animals.
And you don't think there's any propensity at all for those things? Like, it just blows me away. And I understand it, right? It's kind of like in America. Just because they're Muslims doesn't necessarily mean that human beings are different. Leadership is very different than what the public wants, or sometimes what the public even thinks. And they may mouth things, but in real terms, the way they act is going to be different. It is wild to me to see them give those speeches, fire and brimstone, and then be completely obsequious to the U.S. and Israeli interests. And I'm looking at the King of Jordan, by the way, who does that stuff, who would give these heavy speeches and then open their airwaves for Israel to fly their jets through. There has to be a certain amount of blood that these people will be too much for them. Or maybe not. I mean, maybe I'm wrong on this.
You would hope. You would hope, Jamal. But honestly, at this point, just go like anyone, anyone who's listening right now, just read, the latest, just from the past 12 hours, what's been happening in Gaza, just from the past 6 hours, what's been happening in Lebanon, then extrapolate that, to a year. It's like, I don't know about this, the leadership in particular. I don't see it anymore, right? Because I feel like that red line, whatever it may have been, it was passed a while ago.
Yeah. Esteban, man, this is, to call it heartbreaking is an understatement. And I have to be honest, it is, I want to use the term mind-blowing, but the term doesn't really do its service. I can't believe that our government is paying for this. Like, I just can't reconcile that. And then for
your taxpayer funds, the money you pay for taxes.
Over 70% of it is being paid by us. And then to have a political campaign where the Democrat looks people in the face and say, hey, I know that we have a policy that is paying for the killing of your family members and people who look like you, but Donald Trump is horrible, so I need you to vote for us.
Yeah, he's worse. He's worse. How is he worse? You know,
Yeah,
when you're committing
I
a
don't know
genocide,
how.
how can the other person be worse?
It's like, well, Trump is not going to grumble behind the scenes when he's giving weapons and money to Israel to kill.
Exactly. At least, you know,
Europeans.
honestly, at this point, at least he's going to be honest about it, which is the least you can expect from a U.S. politician at this point.
Man, I appreciate this.
Or the
man.
most, I
Thank
guess.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining
Thank
me,
you for
man.
having me, Jamar.
No, I appreciate you joining me anytime to have this conversation. It just sucks. And it kills me that my government is paying for this nonsense. And look, it's a genocide. And it's like, for whatever reason, because it's Arabs or Muslims, it's okay.
Yeah.
And that's the part that kills me more than anything else. It's this human quality of it where it's like, okay, well, these people matter less. And it's like, no, that's not true. That's not what we think. That's not our liberal values. It's like, dude, they matter less. Look at what you're doing. Look at what you're allowing.
Exactly.
It's outrageous.
No, Jamal.
Esteban Carrillo. He is a Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist and current editor for The Cradle. He was previously with Sir English. Esteban, where can people find you, man?
Well, they can find my work at The Cradle Media on social platforms, and they can find my own personal X account, Esteban Carlo, under the. You can probably see it under my name. So yeah, thank you for having me, Jamal. Thank you for everyone who joined, and we'll be talking soon.
Thank you for joining me, man. You have a good one, okay? Have a good weekend. All right, Esteban Carrillo.